Recording in
Hey, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to go through how to improve your seated posture for your yoga practice. So there's primarily two postures that we sit for meditation or pranayama breathing practices in yoga. One of them is virasana, where you're resting on your knees like this. And the other is being in a cross-legged position or some kind of modification of this cross-legged position. So we're going to try working on the cross-legged position first. So if you come with me down to your mat, lay on your side. And we're just keeping the knees one on top of the other. And then I'm going to bring my knees up just a little bit higher. And then I'm going to press, without changing the shape of my bottom leg, I'm going to press up to sitting. Just removing that holster for a moment. So the shape of this leg hasn't changed. Now, this is good for people who are trying to get into a cross-legged position but might have a little bit of discomfort through the knees or tightness through the hips. And then you can add on to this position by just changing the position of your upper body whilst maintaining contact with your knee. So I'm actively pushing my knee down, but I'm not trying to lift my left hip up. And then as I walk the hands around this way a little bit more, I can feel that stretch deepen. And then if you don't have any knee issues, you can come a little bit deeper just by increasing the angle here of your grounded leg. So I'm going to push my left heel away a little bit more. Again, my hip stays on the ground, my knee is pretty much still on the ground. I'm still exerting a force towards the ground with that grounded knee. Whilst I'm here, I might take a few deep breaths. The breath, the diaphragm having a fascial connection here. So any position that's held and breathed in a deep diaphragmatic manner is going to help open the posture. Let's take another couple of breaths here. And then to keep my knee safe, I'm going to tuck my heel in really close to my bottom. And then I'm going to move around to the other side. So just walking around, start in this position because this position ensures that we've got hip, knee and ankle all on the ground at the same time. And then as I push down into that knee, that bottom knee is going to stay pushing down. It doesn't change shape. My hip stays pushing down. I'm going to lift back up into this position. Top leg can just go wherever it wants to go. And then to increase the depth of that stretch through the outside of the leg, I can start to walk hands a little bit further in front. Breathe really deeply. Or I can start to take this heel away from my bottom, but I still have the outside of my right hip and my right knee pushing towards the mat. If you bring your foot out a little bit further and the knee wants to lift away, you're going to twist your knee and you're not really getting the prerequisites that you require for this pose. This is a really good exercise to practice as well if you're an advanced yogi and you like to sit in a full lotus position. This will also help to open up the hips in that way. But our goal today is not to be an impressive yogi. It's just to be able to sit comfortably on the ground. A couple more breaths here. I might bend the elbows also slightly. Breathe deeply. Okay, now to release the knee, I'm going to bring heel back in towards bottom and then spin back around and just take right foot back, curling under through the toes. I'm going to squeeze my right glute. This helps to bring the hip back into position. And then I'm just going to do that on the opposite side as well. So whenever you've had your leg in an externally rotated position, it's a good idea to bring it back into its anatomical position. Right. So all that we've done there with our cross-legged preparation is to help open that chain from hips all the way down to feet. So if you like, just try to sit cross-legged. If you find that your knees are up really high, you can use a yoga block, you can use a cushion, you can use a bolster. A good idea with your yoga block, if you've got your knees quite high, is to take the block underneath your hips and hop up on it. And now that my hips are higher, my knees have a little bit more range to come down. So you can try experimenting with that in your seated position, okay? If you find that you're coming to a seated position and it's just not comfortable to hold and you're required to hold it for any yoga class, you can always just bring one leg out, one leg in, and pop a block underneath, and you can still sit quite comfortably through the upper body without having to wrestle around with legs. And that is the goal essentially of any seated position, is that we don't want to have to worry about the legs. Spine is able to stay straight without pain in the hip or the knee. Now, if cross-legged is not available to you, then Virasana or Hero Pose is also a good modification. So I'm going to show you how to get into that. Let's do just a really easy prep, coming down onto our back. And just hugging the thighs in towards the belly. So if you do this position, or you try for this position and you find that your feet are really far away from your heel, that your heels are really far away from your butt, your knees aren't going to bend enough to hold you in Virasana, in that kneeling position, okay? So you should be able to bring your hands under your knees and squeeze your heels into your bottom, and feel that when you squeeze your heels in towards your bottom, that you're squashing your fingers, and you can feel the little tendons popping up behind the knee, sort of pressing into your hand. And then we can let that soften. And again, squeeze heels in towards bottom. So here the knees are not under load, even though they're in the required position that we will need for our hero pose. There's no load, so there's very little chance of injuring the knee. And then let that soften. So if you are here, again, don't try hero pose. Instead, come to an alternative position. All right. If you're okay with this, we can come back over onto our knees and simply just start standing on the knees. And then in this position, I'll try curling the toes under. Just making sure my heels and my knees are in alignment. And then I'll come down onto all fours. A block between the knees here is also a really good idea for this preparation. And again, I'm keeping my toes tucked, and all I'm doing is just a little slow movement, letting my hips come towards my heels, and then a slow movement forward, hips away from heels. And then you also want to check that when you do this, your heels don't sort of come out to the side. We want the heels right in behind the sit bones. So there is a little bit of internal rotation, or a sense that you're trying to bring the heels in towards each other as you rock through this movement. Now, if you can take the top of the feet flat, you can experiment with bringing your hips down to your heels, but you need to go slow. And the way you slow this down is to push your chin into your mat. Imagine that you're trying to straighten your legs as you go down. And if you get any apprehension here in the knee, a feeling of giving way or clicking or popping, you just don't go any further. Come forward. And then slowly back. And I'm using my hands to also share my body weight, so my knees don't have to tilt. all of my body weight. Okay, so this is a really good preparation to maintain your knee mobility or perhaps rebuild the knee mobility. If you've had any soft tissue injury, you will know that the knee will tend to tighten and you've got to work through that scar tissue. So this movement will help with that, as long as you're not going too hard too soon. And then if you can bring your hips to your heels and there's no issue with the knee, then you can remove your block, walk the knees in a little closer, and then here you are in that Virasana position where the spine is nice and straight. The other modification that we can try, which is great if you're almost in Virasana, but not quite, is to use your bolster. Now, if you practice for a long time, your bolster will go flat over time. So if you've lifted up onto its skinnier edge, you've obviously got more height. We'll walk the knees in against the bolster, and I'm going to start again with toes tucked, and then gently come down. And then if I come here and it feels okay, and the bolster is enough of a space between my bottom and my heels, then you can sit in Virasana here and find that your seated pose is still nice and straight. It will become a bit hard to hold here at the front of the feet, however. So try again, slow-mo, pushing down into the feet, using that same technique. And then your bolster here placed at the hips gives you, again, that little bit of space where you can have your pelvis in a neutral position and you're not trying too hard to sit up straight. So this is often a preferred position for people who might do a lot of meditation and are able to sit, say, longer than 5 or 10 minutes in this position. But working your way into that position, just using those dynamic movements. One thing I want you to also be aware of when you're improving your seated position for meditative practices is having the knees wide in this position. It's okay, but if you're coming into that position from, say, a down dog or on all fours, just make sure that your knees face straight ahead as you take your hips down, and then bring the knees open. So that saves your knees from twisting, okay? So again, we have this position here where we can work in our seated meditation. And you can also use a block just underneath the hips here as well, like you would. So let's spend the last few minutes in our favorite seated position, whether it be Virasana or Sukhasana. Sukha meaning easeful, cross-legged position, or some variation of that. I'm going to use a block because it allows my knees to open. And then from that comfortable seat, remember, it doesn't really matter about if you've got a fancy lotus position or one leg out or one leg in. The goal, again, is to keep the spine nice and straight. Chin mudra with the thumb and index finger, sealing the yin and yang of the body. We breathe in deeply. Imagine the spine lengthening as the breath travels up the spine. And as we exhale, letting the shoulders relax, we imagine the breath moving down the back of the spine, like water running off. Inhaling through the front line of the body, from tailbone to crown of head. And exhale. Feel the breath moving down through the back line of the body. So with a little bit of preparation, your seated position for yoga meditation or breath work can become much more easeful with those techniques. Thanks for coming along. Hari Om Tat Sat. Namaste. Another tip when you're coming out of cross-legged as well, make sure your knees aren't twisted. Send the legs straight out in front before you stand up to move.